Today we're going to be in Mark chapter 11. Mark chapter 11. Let me remind you a little bit of what has happened so far in the book of Mark. Remember who the book of Mark is actually written to. It's written to people who have accepted Jesus, who are being majorly persecuted, and they're trying to decide, man, am I supposed to follow Jesus or not? And as we've been looking, Jesus is saying some pretty radical things here. Things like the first will be last, and the last will be first in the kingdom of God. He gives a lot of talk about suffering and service. He looks at people like the rich young ruler and says, no, you have to give everything away before you follow me. He's calling us to this higher standard of living that the world does not seem to recognize. But the question that's always in the background, and should be in the background of our minds as well, is it worth it? Right? Because, really sacrificing everything for Jesus is a big, big, big deal. Right? This isn't a small calling. This is a big, big calling. And I think often what we tend to do is we say, sure, I'll give Jesus anything, while sacrificing next to nothing. And then we go, oh, well, look how good I am. Like I said that I'd follow Jesus. Isn't that good? But you really have to come face to face with what Jesus is asking here. Put your shoes in the people, and put on the people who they're writing to, be in their shoes and see what suffering they're going through. And then ask yourself, if I was being persecuted, if this was hurting my family, if this was hurting my business, if this was hurting my retirement fund, if this was hurting my comfort, if this was having people that I love think about me differently and maybe not want to be around me, if this is messing with my control over my life, would I still follow Jesus fully? Or would I back off? Make excuses, be very quiet about my Christianity, be very quiet about following Jesus. So we're seeing Jesus do amazing things. We're seeing who Jesus is, but we're face to face with this reality that Jesus is telling us what we have to do, and it's a big, big deal. So now Jesus is going to be coming into Jerusalem, where he will be beaten, where he will be put on a cross, and where he will die and be buried and eventually rise again. At this point, he's done things like heal the blind and heal the lame and cast out the demons. And right before this, you could see in other Gospels, I think specifically in John, he actually raises Lazarus from the dead, and people saw it. And people are losing their minds over it, because I don't know about you, I haven't seen that happen lately. And so word is getting around that this Jesus that is already bringing in all these crowds, this Jesus who's already attracting all these people, this Jesus who's already been healing, already been teaching, already seen, as if nothing else, definitely prophetic, has now raised someone from the dead. And now he's going to come into Jerusalem with all the other pilgrims who are coming into Jerusalem during one of the biggest festivals that the Jewish people have. So it's people, and it's pandemonium, and it's a lot of things all going on at once. This is what we're walking into. But before Jesus walks into Jerusalem, I want you to see what happens. Mark chapter 11, starting in verse 1. Now when they approached Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and told them, go into the village ahead of you, and as soon as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there on which no one has ever sat. Now untie it and bring it. And if anyone says to you, why are you doing this? Say, the Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here right away. Do you see what Jesus is saying here? He's saying, I want you to go. There's going to be a colt. It's tied up. It's not my colt, but it's going to be tied up. And I want you to untie that colt. And I want you to take it. And if anyone sees you do it, and they're going, hey, stop stealing this colt, you're going to tell them, the Lord needs it. And you're just going to keep walking. Don't you guys think that's crazy? I mean, don't you guys think that's weird? Like, let me try and compare it, okay? Jesus comes to you, and he says, hey, there's a nice Ford Mustang down the street. I want you to break into that car. The keys are already in it. And I want you to just start it up. I want you to drive off. And if somebody says, hey, why are you stealing my car? You go, the Lord needs it. And then you bring it to me. Literally, that's like what's happening here. But then look what happens. So they went and they found a colt outside of the street, tied by the door. And they untied it. And some of those standing there said to him, what are you doing, untying the colt? And they answered them, just as Jesus had said, so they let them go. And they brought the donkey to Jesus and threw their clothes on it, and he sat on it. Let me ask you, how prepared are you to listen and follow what Jesus says? This isn't a necessarily difficult thing, right? I mean, he's not saying go and heal demons. He's not saying, go and do this impossible thing. Like, everybody can untie this colt and bring it to Jesus. But he's asking them to do something that is majorly uncomfortable. Majorly uncomfortable. How willing are you to do things that Jesus has told you to do that is uncomfortable? Do things that might feel almost like it's trespassing. Do things that not only feel uncomfortable to you, but feel uncomfortable to the people around you. Because if you're willing to do it, understand, it's not like Jesus has never told you to do anything. Jesus tells us to do a lot of things. And as I think through a lot of the things that Jesus tells us to do, a lot of them are pretty uncomfortable. These people could have reacted in any possible way, right? And it would have been justified. They're stealing a colt and taking it. And yet Jesus says, I've already taken care of it. Jesus says this is what they're going to do. But here's the thing. The disciples still had to go and do it. They had to go into those uncomfortable situations. They had to trust that Jesus had it all taken care of. They had to trust that Jesus had everything worked out. But listen to how cool this is. Did Jesus need those disciples to actually go and get the colt for him? No. Jesus could have gone and done it. But understand, the disciples that listened to what Jesus said actually assisted in fulfilling prophecy. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Not Jesus, but the disciples are being used to fulfill prophecy. Now, where do I see this? You have to understand that I believe it's in Zephaniah 9:9. It talks about that he will ride in on a colt. Well, how did he get the colt? The disciples brought it to him. Did you know that Jesus wants to use you in the same exact way? God could really reveal himself to people in any way. Does God really need us to spread the gospel? No, he's God. But God has made it clear that he wants to use us to spread the gospel. That's how he wants to do it. Let me say this again. God doesn't need us to spread the gospel, but he has decided to use us to spread the gospel. And where the disciples are able to help with the fulfillment of prophecy, God is giving you the opportunity to be a part of what God is doing. He's giving you the opportunity to do something way bigger than the here and now. Something that will last for eternity. You know, one of the things that I like hanging around older people. One of the things they always say is they're like, can't take it with you. Especially people, they'll like go through they'll get sick or something like that, and they'll start like giving away everything in their house. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that. Maybe your friends have done that. And they just start giving away everything. You're like, why are you giving this away? And they're like, can't take it with me. You know what you can take with you? The people that God has used you to bring to himself. I've said this multiple times. Heaven is going to be incredible. But you could change what heaven looks like right now for yourself. Did you know that? You could change one thing. And that is who you have in heaven alongside of you. Once you get to heaven, you will never have another opportunity to share the gospel because everyone there is saved. Here, you don't have to look hard at all. And I don't know about you, I don't want to be in heaven all by myself. Maybe my family's there and they're excited. I know my family will be there. So my family's there and it's good to see them again. But for the most part, there's not many people with me. What I want Jesus to be like, all right, we got a big table for Brant. And all the people that I've gotten to just share the gospel with, all the people that I've gotten to pour into, all the people that the Lord allowed me, who am I, that I got to touch their lives, that's who I get to spend eternity with. That is what excites me. That's a beautiful thing. And you get to do that right now. But let me tell you, in the same way that it's uncomfortable, in the same way that you don't know how it's all going to work out, just like the disciples did, you have to take those steps. You have to take those steps and do what Jesus says. Here's another thing that you might not consider. God has been doing a lot of work in people's lives before you actually talk to them. Did you know that? God has been doing a lot of work in people's lives before you invite them to church. God has been doing a lot of work in people's lives before you invite them to a Bible study that you want to start at your work. Before you just invite them over to your house for a barbecue to get to know them. God's been doing a lot of work. You don't know what that is. The truth is, this is what I believe. The Lord has been working on every single one of our lives since we were born and before we were born. All of this time, God has been working, God has been moving, God has been preparing. Who are you to think that your invitation, that your friendship, that what the Lord is wanting you to extend to that person, that's not the thing that will then tip them over to accepting Jesus? What makes you think that? How do you know that they just don't need to hear the true, good word of the gospel one more time? How do you know that they're not struggling every night with the hopelessness that they're coming face to face with the joylessness of facing death, that they're dealing with their sin and their guilt? You won't know. But you can share. I just want to ask that when you consider inviting someone to church, starting a new relationship with someone, maybe even sharing the gospel if the conversation goes that way, that maybe this is the time that God is going to do something. And maybe you've gone, Brant, I've had too many of those conversations and they haven't gone well. Well, understand that that conversation is just another way that God is working on their life, and he is going to use that down the line, hopefully, prayerfully, to have breakthrough later on. You never know. But we need to trust God enough that he's working, and listen, he wants to use us. If we will go into our lives, into every single conversation, into our workplaces, to ball fields, to swimming pools, to wherever you go, and we come with the attitude that God is working and that God wants to use us, I believe that you will start to see God really work in more miraculous ways. Why? Is it because my faithfulness unlocks something? No, it's because you have actually gone in faith and said yes to Jesus. And here's one of the beautiful things. When you say yes to Jesus and actually do what he asks you to do, get this, you get to see God work right in front of you. You get to see God move. You get to see testimony happening right in front of you. But you have to say yes. You have to do the uncomfortable things. But that's the only way that we're going to start to see revival start to come. When we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, say yes to Jesus, knowing that he's already moving in their lives and he wants to use us. Isn't that's just such an incredible thing to me. These men, what did they do to deserve to be part of prophecy? What do we do to get to be a part of the kingdom? And yet, here we are. Verse 7, they brought the donkey to Jesus and threw their clothes on it, and he sat on it. And many people spread their clothes on the road, and others spread leafy branches cut from the fields. And those went ahead, and those who followed, they shouted, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Now, let me tell you, there's a couple of different ways that we can interpret this. Okay? One is, Hosanna means basically save us. God save us. And so you could say that as they're quoting from the book of Psalms here, that what's happening is that they have a full realization of who Jesus is, right? That this is the Messiah. That's what they're trying to say. The other argument for this is during this time, the word Hosanna tended to be kind of used as like a hallelujah, right? So it kind of lost like its messianic flavor. And instead it's just like, go, like here's this man of God. Here's this prophet. And so either way you cut it, right? So either he is a man of God and he is going to do something with the coming kingdom of our father David. In other words, he's going to make our life better. Or that he is the Messiah, whatever that looks like. But look at this. Look what happens. Verse 11, he went into Jerusalem and into the temple. And after looking around at everything, since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. So here's what happens. Jesus comes into Jerusalem with this crowd. It's not a big enough crowd that the Romans are like coming and breaking it up, but I mean, it's a pretty significant crowd. It's got everybody's attention. The people who are with him, I mean, they're really shouting. They're really making a big deal. And yet, by the time he went into the temple, and by the time he left, the crowd was gone. You notice that? Going into Jerusalem, tons of people making big statements, either that he is of God or that he is the Messiah, and yet, by the time that he leaves the temple, there's just the 12. You know what that tells me? their intentions were probably in the wrong place. What do I mean by this? They're excited when everybody else is excited. When the crowd is there, they get all excited. When everybody is shouting, then they get all excited. When Jesus is there and it's convenient and it's easy and they're already going into Jerusalem, then they go, oh, that's easy. I'll just go ahead and do that. And yet, when there is any requirement of waiting, any patience that is needed, anything that goes above and beyond lip service, the bare minimum, they're gone. They're gone. The crowds who so loudly celebrated and exalted Jesus, they all left because the chances are that they were fake. They weren't serious about actually following Jesus. They gave Jesus his due, and now they believe that Jesus should automatically make their life easier. I don't know if you've ever talked so boldly as I've talked to God before. But I've gone to God and I've said, God, I've been to church. Why am I dealing with this? God, I prayed about it once. Why haven't you fixed it? God, I've done what you said. I've been a pretty good person. Why haven't you fixed this in my life? Why am I so unhappy? Why am I so unsatisfied? Because I was like the crowd. I figured I gave Jesus his due, and now I should receive good gifts, right? There's no kids in here, right? I treated God like Santa Claus. That I made my list, I sent it to him, he should see that I'm a good boy, and then I should get lots and lots of gifts. Everything that I asked for. And when God isn't like Santa Claus, I get upset. Because I gave him his due, I did the deal that I thought in my mind, and when I didn't get it, I'm gone. I don't want to deal with this anymore. If God, you start to think like this, if God's not going to keep his end of the bargain, I don't want to have anything to do with this. That's what the crowd thinks. How often do we give God lip service or do the bare minimum only to expect health, wealth, and prosperity from God in our lives? We go, we go to church, or we go to a conference, or we come to an event, or we raise our hands in praise, or we take notes, or I help the kids every once in a while. However, after the little bit of time that we spend at church, we leave, and we don't think about it again. We leave and then we expect God to grant all of these natural desires that we have. The Christian life is not about 1 hour a week. It's about your entire lifestyle. If we're only giving to God our 1 hour a week, or 2 hours a week since you guys are here, I hope you guys are also here on Sunday. What do we think that that's going to do for us? Do we think that we'll trust him in the difficult places in our lives when we've only trusted him here and there before? Do we think that we'll be filled with all the fruit of the Spirit of God when we spend most of the week ignoring it? Do we think that we deserve God to do what we want because we cheered him on a little? That's what's so sad, man. The crowds, they're here, they're saying the right things. It looks like they're doing the right things. But when push comes to shove and he exits the temple, no one's there. Look at what Jesus has to say about this. Verse 12. The next day, when they went out from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree with leaves, he went out to find if there was anything on it. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. Okay? Keep that in mind as we read what Jesus does next. They came to Jerusalem, And he went into the temple and began to throw out those buying and selling. And he overturned tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves, and would not permit anyone to carry goods through the temple. He was teaching them, "Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of thieves?" And the chief priests and the scribes heard it, and they started looking for a way to kill him, for they were afraid of him, because the whole crowd was astonished by his teaching. And whenever evening came, they would not go out of the city. Here's the crowds again. They're saying all the right things, and yet when they're actually at the temple, what are they doing? They're buying and selling, honestly, and even scamming the people who are wanting to come and worship God. They're using God for their own benefit instead of actually worshiping God for who He is. This is a big problem. Let me just ask, well, why are you here? Why are you here tonight? What's the intention of your heart? Because it's really easy to come to church but have an ulterior motive for being here. You could come to church and have other things on your mind. You could come to church just because you feel like, hey, people are expecting me to be here. If I'm not here, Miss Jo Rowland's going to give me a call, and so I better show up, right? I need to make sure that I'm here for appearances. I need to make sure that people think that I'm a good Christian guy. And so you get dressed up and you come. But then the whole time that you're here, you're thinking about 12 different things. It reminds me one time, I was working in a church, and there was a lady, and she had one of those, I don't remember if you guys remember this, when iPhones went really big for some reason, they were almost as big as an iPad. And so she had her phone, and it was on full brightness, and then she would pick up a hymnal. We never used hymnals, and she would be on Facebook the whole time like this, and from stage, I could literally see everything that she was doing, and so I don't know who she was trying to fool, but me and the pastor would just be like, what is she doing? Who does she think she's fooling? Why is she here if she's going to be on Facebook the whole time? And God, who sees your heart and sees your intentions, I think He looks at a lot of us and ask that same question. Because while your body might be here, your mind and your heart totally elsewhere. Your mind and your heart couldn't be further from the Lord. And I'm sure that there are many times, I know for a fact there are many times where the Lord would look at my life and be like, why are you even here? You should have just stayed home. If you're going to come here, not wanting to change, not wanting to have an expectation of meeting with the Lord, not wanting to worship me, to put everything at my feet, to really be who I've called you to be. If that's not your heart, you should have just stayed home. And so while these people, they're in the temple, I'm sure if you asked them, they go, oh, well, we're doing good. We're doing good things. We're making it to where people can worship. But they've made what should be a house of prayer into a business. They've made what should be a house of prayer into a den of thieves. And if we are not careful, we can do the same. Let me get very personal. If we are not careful, we can allow church policies and politics, church popularity, tradition, whose family you belong to, all of these things, we could allow those things to actually take greater priority than actually worshiping God and just simply doing what He said. And the last thing I want is for the Lord to come back. And he goes, why'd you have all those rules? Rules are important. Traditions are important. What you've done in the church, I believe that you deserve honor. But that should never, ever, ever supersede the very simple, straightforward things that the Lord has told you to do in your life. We should not overcomplicate church. We should not make it way too hard. And moreover, we should make sure that we keep the first thing. And that is that we worship God with all of our hearts, with all of our minds, with all of our soul, and with all of our strength. Look what happens here in verse 20. Early in the morning. Remember what he told to the fig tree. He went, no fruits. He said, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. Well, early in the morning, as they were passing, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots up. Then Peter remembered, and he said to them, Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered. Now, why do you think that Peter is so astonished by this fig tree being dead? I mean, let's just think about this for a second, right? I mean, he's seen Jesus do some insane stuff. He, at this point, has seen Jesus, raise people from the dead. He's seen him cast out demons. He's seen him take a very little bit of food and make it into a lot of food. Twice. He's seen him calm storms and walk on water and heal the blind and heal the lame and heal the sick. And then he's like, oh, look, this fig tree, it's dead. How did you do that, right? That's interesting to me. You want to know why? This is one of the only, in fact, I think this is the only destructive miracle that Jesus does. In every other miracle, he heals, he restores, he multiplies. Here, he destroys. What is Jesus trying to tell us? You see all these crowds? You see all the people at the temple? He's showing their destruction is coming. What does he want us to know? How do we stop that from happening? Listen to this. Jesus replied to them, right? So Peter points out, whoa, the fig tree that you cursed is dead from the roots up. Crazy. Listen to his reply. Have faith in God. What? Truly, I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Therefore, I tell you, everything you pray and you ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you of your wrongdoing. What is Jesus trying to get at? Jesus doesn't care if you have all your leaves. Jesus cares if you have fruit in your life. Well, Brant, how do I have fruit in my life? There is only one place, and that is fruit has to come from God himself. So what he's trying to say is when Peter goes, whoa, this is destruction. This is a destructive miracle. Jesus, why did you destroy that? I've never seen you destroy. He says, you don't want to be destroyed? If that's your heart, let me tell you how you do this. You need to believe that God has done everything for you. Everything for you. That you can't take pride in your talents. You can't take pride in your good looks. You can't take pride in your health. You can't take pride in your goodness. You deserve none of it and have earned none of it. Everything that you have has been given to you. Understand that first and foremost. But then when you start to understand destruction, what you really deserve, you go, well, how do I avoid that? It's like a mountain that's in my way. Jesus says if you believe it, he'll take the mountain, he'll throw it into the sea. He'll give you everything you need. He'll make your path clear to be forgiven of your sins and restored back to God. That's what he's trying to tell you here. That whoever does not doubt in his heart but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Those of us who look to Jesus and we say, Jesus, there's no way that I could be brought back in a relationship with God. There's no way. I get the impossibility of the situation. But I'm going to say that Jesus, what you have done for me, that your death, burial, and resurrection on the cross satisfies my sin, restores me back to God, and gives me the Holy Spirit. Jesus is saying, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you. How do I know that that's the correct interpretation? Because what he talks about in verse 25, and wherever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgiving him so that your Father will also forgive you at your wrongdoing. Understand, it's not just talking about just like, hey, if you say it, then you get the power of God behind it. Look, when you're walking with God, you can understand that you have the power of God with you. Let me also say that I've experienced many times in my life, I've shared some of them with you, that where I've prayed for things and I believe that God could do it and he just does it. There are times in my life where I really sit and I pray and I say, God, it'd be great if this happens. And he either does what I ask or he ends up giving me something better that I needed. He never puts me in a worse situation. When I really sit and think about how the Lord has lined up my life, he's never actually put me in a worse situation. He's always done what's best. And so, yeah, you could apply that some here, right? But what you're really seeing is what you really need. The mountain that's in front of you that needs to be tossed into the sea is that Jesus is going to come and he's going to forgive you and he's going to make the pathway straight and easy, and the things that were impossible, he'll give to you. Therefore, I ask you, everything that you pray and ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. The greatest things in life, and in the afterlife, are at your fingertips if you are a Bible-believing, Jesus-trusting Christian. The greatest things. Now you might go, Brant, that seems a little bit hyperbolic. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know how my kids are treating me. You don't know what my boss is saying to me at work. You don't know what my friends say about me behind my back. You don't know what my doctor has told me recently. You don't know how my knee feels once it starts to get colder weather. You don't know. And yet you're telling me that God is doing the best for me? Yeah, I genuinely believe that. I think the New Testament's pretty clear about that. When Paul says he does everything for our good. This is the same Paul, by the way, who has a thorn in the flesh. Remember? So it's not like his life is easy. It's not like he's never been stoned outside of a city to go back into that city. It's not like he's never been shipwrecked. It's not like he's never been kicked out of multiple regions. Like he's lived it pretty hard, and yet he's able to say, God does good for those who love him. Everything good. So how do we end up not being like those who were in the temple? We have to go to God and we have to ask him for it. God, help me to receive everything that you have for me. Help me to understand how wonderful my salvation is. God, help me to understand how all the things in my life that might be hard and frustrating, how they will line up for the best for me. And God, help me understand how you can use me to reach others. Now listen to this, verse 27. And they came again to Jerusalem as he was walking in the temple. The chief priests and scribes and the elders came, and they asked him, by what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority to do these things? And Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question, then answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was John's baptism from heaven or human origin? Answer me. Okay. Well, they discussed it among themselves. And they started to say, look, if we say from heaven, he will say, then why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, they were afraid of the crowd because everyone thought that John was truly a prophet. So they answered Jesus, well, we don't know. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. What's going on here? We got to understand a couple of things to really understand this paragraph. One of the questions that I always had is, man, why are the Pharisees so hard on Jesus? And what did the Pharisees think about John the Baptist? Two pretty good questions. Or at least I think they're good questions. Maybe you got all the answers, and who knows? I think they're good questions, so I'm going to answer them. Well, from what I understand, is the Pharisees didn't mind John the Baptist. In fact, if you asked them, they would probably say, John the Baptist was probably a pretty good prophet. He was doing some good things. He was saying some right things. And so if you asked them, probably one-on-one, they would say, well, where do you think that John's baptism was from? Was it from heaven or human origin? They'd probably say, honestly, from heaven. If I were to guess. Now, there might be some debate on that, right? But they never seemed to be against John the Baptist. John the Baptist died not because of the Pharisees, right? He died because of Herod and that whole story. And that's because he was calling out sin, and that's a whole different thing. I'm talking specifically about the Pharisees. So they seem to have a pretty good opinion of John the Baptist. So why don't they like Jesus? Because John the Baptist and his whole ministry is out of the way. Right? John the Baptist is in the wilderness. He's not bothering anybody. He's not stepping on the Pharisees' toes. He's preaching from the margins. So if you want to go and you want to hear John the Baptist, cool. He's over there. Pharisees are over here. No problem. Jesus, on the other hand, is very, very much where the Pharisees are. In fact, right now he's in the middle of Jerusalem, in the temple, teaching these things. And so he's stepping on their toes. Here's another difference. John the Baptist never claimed divine authority. Or that he was divine. Let me clarify. That he was divine. John the Baptist never says, I'm divine. Jesus does. Well, that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference. Here's another difference. While John the Baptist is building up large crowds, again, they're out of the way. Jesus is building up even larger crowds that seem to have a little bit more political fervor. It feels more political. Jesus' miracles, they're causing these massive crowds and people to flock to him. And after raising Lazarus, religious leaders feared. They say, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come, and they'll take away both our place and our nation. That's the real feeling of Jesus. And so as he comes into the triumphal entry, they're already feeling like, whoa, 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 this is not stable. He's not like John the Baptist who's over here. He's right here. And we're going to get lumped into him. And people are going to start listening to him and not listening to us. And it's going to cause all these problems. But here's the biggest problem. John the Baptist definitely spoke against the Pharisees. But he really didn't do it to their face. Jesus spoke against them to their faces. And he challenges their authority, their income, their political standing, and their religious standing. Jesus is constantly in their face, in their temples, undermining their authority, their moral standing, and temple-based influence. And has even talked about money with them multiple times. So when it comes to Jesus, he's a way bigger threat. John the Baptist, you just stay over there. You do your own thing. I'll give an example. In Colorado, there's this big deal. It's called Colorado Native. And basically, if you're born in Colorado, like, you're good. But they hated people from Texas and California. They hated them. I mean, it was like, oh, if they figured out you were from California or Texas, like, you'd almost get spit on. Because in their mind, they're like, you're buying up all of our housing and making everything more expensive. You're making our cities way too populated. All of our touristy stuff that we like to do and get out in the woods, well, now there's way more people. And so this Colorado Native idea was like, you could come and visit, but you don't get to stay, right? This is our spot. You guys stay in California and in Texas. But once they started to come in, it was a real problem. And that's what's happening with Jesus, right? With John the Baptist, they're like, he's over there. Every once in a while he might come over here, but he's really over there. Jesus is in the midst of what we're doing. And so they hated him for it. And so no matter what they thought about John the Baptist, and no matter what they thought about Jesus, their own wants and their own pride kept them from accepting any kind of truth. That's what Jesus is saying here. Because look, they're like, look, if we say that John the Baptist, his baptism is from heaven, then Jesus will easily say, well, why didn't you believe him when he said, I'm the Messiah? And yet, if we try and bend things and say, oh, it's from human origin, everybody else knows so clearly that John the Baptist was from God, they'll attack us. And so even though they're in this illogical place where they can't even process their own feelings, they're in no place to where they can accept Jesus whatsoever. And this is why Jesus says, look, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Because if you can't take time to really internalize what Jesus is doing and what Jesus is saying and what John the Baptist was doing and what John the Baptist is saying, if you can't internalize that, then you're automatically rejecting God. I have 2 minutes, so let me explain what this looks like practically in someone's life so that we could start to seek it out whenever people maybe come into our church with a similar attitude. There are a lot of reasons why people do not accept Jesus. Rarely are those reasons because they have thought through it all. Rarely are those reasons purely their own rational thinking. Most of the time, it's one of three things. One, yeah, they've kind of thought about it rationally, but that usually has to be paired with one of the other two. Another one is that they don't like something about what God does. Usually is they don't like the fact that we have this good God, but we have people starving in Africa. That seems evil to them, and so they believe that they're morally more right than God. Okay, But again, that seems to be pretty rare. What usually happens is the third one. In some way, they've been hurt in a way that they could categorically put it as church hurt. Someone who should have been a moral authority in their life really failed them. So they have a messed up view of God. Someone in the church failed them. Even if a pastor who's a good pastor, but then the pastor leaves and goes to another church, and that person doesn't fully understand why, that can be church hurt. They can feel abandoned. There's all these things that happen in people that they're always wrestling with. In the same way that there's all these things in you that you wrestle with. But it's stopping them from actually searching their heart fully to accepting God. Notice the Pharisees do not talk about rational thinking whatsoever. The Pharisees do not even talk about Jesus' morality whatsoever. You know what they talk about? How accepting Jesus would affect them in their life. And so when there are people around you, at your work, or people who come into church, we have to understand that they come from a real place of hurt. You know what that means? Be very, very patient with people. But that also means that you have to be very, very loving and caring to people as well. The way that people need to see Jesus is not through all proofs of Jesus, or all of this logical thinking of Jesus, or all these gotcha statements. People need to be loved before they can really see the truth. They need to be bandaged up until their heart is in a place where they can really accept it. You see what I'm saying here? For the Pharisees, no way could they accept it. They were never thinking. It's all about their feelings and it's all about themselves. That's what we're battling against. Not only are we battling against Satan himself, but we're battling against the heart of man, which might be scarier.